Incredible moment revealed. Millionaire Cowboy surprises old couple rebuilding their life after losing their farm. Jack Mitchell, the rugged cowboy with a heart as vast as Texas itself, entered Mel's diner, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. The flickering neon sign outside barely hinted at the growing storm within him. He had arrived, as always, hoping to drown his concerns in a cup of black coffee. But today, something felt different. The air was heavy with whispered secrets. As he settled into his usual corner booth, his ear caught snatches of conversation, laced with desperation. A couple's plight was unfolding before him, stirring echoes of his own past. Martha and George, two precious souls in their 70s, had lost their family farm. The weight of their world seemed to crush their spirited demeanor, a stark reminder of his own childhood struggles. Jack's mind raced. The couple's hardships tugged at his heart. A gnawing instinct propelled him to act, yet insecurities fused with his resolve. Was he simply a wealthy outsider swooping in to fix what he could never truly understand? Questions circled like vultures, feeding on his fervor. He breathed deeply, fighting the tightness in his chest. Memories of growing up poor surfaced like ghosts, his parents toiling day and night, barely scraping by. Jack had clawed his way up, each sacrifice etching the lessons of hard work into his bones. Yet here, faced with the notion of helping, he hesitated. What if Martha and George saw his wealth as a handout rather than the genuine connection he felt emerging with them? Would they welcome his aid, or would it breed bitterness and resentment? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The diner bustled around him, yet he felt cocooned in a bubble of uncertainty. Inside him, conflicting emotions waged war. The immense weight of the potential fallout bore down. The judgment, the whispers that he's a sleek millionaire intruding on their legacy. Jack knew that if he structured a plan to help, he might be met with kindness, but also echoed resentment from others who would view it as charity. As he glanced at the couple, laughter and warmth danced around their shared stories, contrast against shadows of despair creeping into their lives. He could see the flicker of hope in their eyes, a flicker he felt a deep responsibility to fuel. But the very thought of stepping into their lives made his stomach churn. Would his offering of aid shatter the fragile peace that clung to them? In that moment, clenching his fists, he understood that it would not be merely a simple act of kindness. It was a decision that could rip apart the fabric of a community, scattering his sense of belonging like dust in the wind. Jack felt the tension spiral tighter as he battled against impending dread. If he stayed true to his convictions, he risked everything: his reputation, his heart. As he envisioned the town hall meeting, murmurs of disbelief washed over him. Would he be seen as a savior, or simply an unwelcome interloper? The fear of their scorn lodged in his throat like a stubborn thorn. "Damn it," he muttered under his breath, remembering the warmth of Martha and George's hands in his as they shared laughter over coffee earlier. Just as he thought he'd reached a conclusion, a wordless question loomed larger. What exactly defined generosity? As Jack pondered the gravity of his internal struggle, an unexpected clarity broke through the dense fog of uncertainty hanging over him. The memory of his own childhood, painful but formative, emerged as an anchor amidst the tumultuous waters of his emotions. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, it all flashed before him, reminding him of the resilience he had forged through adversity. He had once been on the receiving end of generosity himself, shaped by kindness that did not feel transactional, but rather human. But the question lingered: how to approach Martha and George without it feeling like a handout? This thought nagged at him, igniting a flicker of determination. He needed a plan, something that respected their dignity while also offering genuine support. It wasn't just about money, it was about forming a connection. Feeling the collective gaze of the diner, Jack rose from his booth and strode to the register, making his presence known to everyone around him. He wasn't just a millionaire cowboy. He was a man molded by the same struggles, deserving not only of success, but of meaningful connections. "Hey, Mel," he said to the diner owner, a grizzled man with experience etched into every crease of his face. "How about organizing a benefit dinner for Martha and George, a way to show the community's support? Maybe we could raise some funds to get them back on their feet." Mel rubbed his chin, considering the idea. "A good thought, Jack, but you know this town. You might catch more flack than support." "Then let's turn it into a community gathering. People might surprise you. If they see it's about bringing folks together, they might come around. We can rally around what connects us." He sensed something shift in Mel's demeanor, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of Jack's earnestness. There was a delicate thread of possibility knitting itself into his plan, and with every second that passed, he felt his self-doubt begin to unravel. The thought of enabling others, rather than merely providing for them, fueled a burgeoning excitement in his chest. Returning to his booth, Jack's mind whirred with possibilities. How to frame the message? It needed to resonate on a profound level, appealing directly to the hearts of those who had stood by Martha and George through stormy days. His fingers tapped on the table, a rhythmic beat echoing the confidence growing within him. As he crafted his vision, Jack realized that this wasn't merely about helping an old couple. It was about fostering a sense of belonging in a community, reflecting generosity as a two-way street rather than an act of charity. Real connections could grow from this initiative. He had the chance to demonstrate that generosity was not dictated by wealth, but by the heart's willingness to engage. The kindness he sought to sow would not just aid Martha and George. It would help him reclaim his own narrative, shifting the perception even within himself from an outsider to an integral part of this landscape. Just as he felt his plan solidifying into something concrete, a sudden unease washed over him. What if this community meeting backfired? What if, instead of fostering unity, it laid bare divisions deep-rooted in envy and scorn toward his wealth? Yet the gnawing urge to step forward rose stronger than ever, propelling him toward an inevitable confrontation with both the community and his own fears. His stomach churned, but within that churn was a genesis of a choice, one that promised revelation, not just for him, but for those he sought to inspire. In that moment of realization, he understood the transformative power of vulnerability. The fear of rejection would be a part of this process, yet he had to face it. Jack Mitchell was determined to embrace the unease. The time had come to act. With resolve blazing in his gut, he committed himself to a cause that could redefine not only Martha and George's lives, but his own. Jack took a deep breath and cradled the notion. He was ready to confront not just his community, but the man he needed to evolve into. As he mentally prepared for the town meeting, a new question emerged. How would they truly perceive this offer of collaboration? Would their scorn be louder than the cries for help? An air of tension hung around Jack as he left the diner, the bell over the door ringing a sharp note behind him. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch in tandem with his thoughts. Each step toward his truck felt weighted, not just from the physical task of walking, but with the enormity of what he was about to embark on. His mind raced with potential outcomes, each one more daunting than the last. As he climbed into the cab, he caught his reflection in the side mirror. The ruggedness of his face told stories that words could not. He wasn't just a figure encased in wealth. He was the embodiment of struggles and triumphs, a mix of both past and present. Yet, staring into his own eyes, he felt an unfamiliar vulnerability creep in. This confrontation with his community would demand more than just words. It required authentic engagement and a willingness to be judged. He turned the ignition, the engine roaring to life, drowning out the noise of self-doubt nagging at the back of his mind. Driving through the familiar streets, he recalled the faces of those who had shaped him. Teachers, friends, and even strangers who had extended their hands when he was at his lowest. Each memory ignited a flicker of resolve, pushing him further into his mission. Arriving at the community center, he parked and took a moment to collect himself. The building loomed in front of him, its brick facade both inviting and imposing. He could feel his heartbeat quicken, a physical manifestation of his anxiety. It was a space that had been alive with laughter, meetings, and debates, places where people connected. But would they connect with him instead of the wealth they perceived? Jack walked inside, the wooden floor creaking under his boots, announcing his presence. People gathered in clusters, whispering and fidgeting with drinks in hand. Their eyes turned toward him as he entered, brimming with curiosity and skepticism. The weight of their gazes felt like a spotlight, yet he refused to turn back. His mind steeled, focusing on the purpose rather than the collective scrutiny. As he approached the small podium, he could see Martha and George seated in the crowd. They seemed older, weariness etched into their features. A pang of urgency struck Jack. This wasn't just an idea, it was their chance for hope. He cleared his throat, feeling every pair of eyes fixate on him in anticipation. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice steadying as he spoke. "I know I stand before you as a man who has made a life through hard work and luck. But tonight, I'm here not as a millionaire, but as a neighbor who understands that community is built on connection." He shared his vision, carefully selecting words that stripped away any suggestion of charity. He spoke of mutual respect, of honoring the tenacity of Martha and George, not merely as recipients of aid, but as valued members of the community who had given so much throughout the years. Jack noticed a shift in the crowd, heads nodding slightly, murmurs of agreement rippling among them. Yet doubt still lingered, lurking like shadows at the edges of his confidence. What if his delivery didn't resonate? What if the laughter faded into bitterness? He felt the tension in the room, palpable and electric, urging him onward. "Together," he continued, "we can create something that transcends financial support. Let's show what it truly means to lift each other up, not out of obligation, but from the understanding that we are all part of this journey." The words poured out, fueled by the urgency within him, igniting a fire he hadn't realized he possessed. As the applause rang out, Jack felt a wave of relief wash over him, mixed with uncertainty. Their initial responses were promising, but how deep would this connection go? And would the doubts that still simmered in the backs of their minds emerge in the days to come? In that moment, Jack understood that this was only the beginning. The real test would be to maintain that momentum, to navigate the challenges ahead while reshaping not only Martha and George's life, but his own. With every small victory he celebrated, fear lingered like a cloud, but it was transforming, becoming a source of energy instead of despair. Jack had stepped into the arena of vulnerability and begun to forge bonds grounded in shared experiences. But would that clamp of hope hold fast when real adversities arose? The question lingered, teasing his resolve. Could he truly become that integral part of the fabric he dreamed to weave? Jack stood at the podium long after the applause faded, the crowd's faces an unsteady mixture of hope and skepticism. He could feel the weight of their expectations settling onto his shoulders, merging with his own expectations for himself. Was he truly ready for the challenges that lay ahead? As he stepped down, the murmurings of the crowd continued, barely audible, yet brimming with undertones that he couldn't quite decipher. He spotted Martha and George. Their expressions were softer now, but the depth of their appreciation weighed against years of unspeakable hardship and losses. Their silent support felt like an anchor, grounding him when uncertainty swirled around. After the gathering dispersed, Jack lingered to speak with them. "What do you think? Did I miss the mark?" he asked, his self-critique echoing in his tone. Martha smiled gently, her weathered hands clasped together. "You did well, Jack. It's not just what you say, but that you're willing to listen." Listening. The words stayed with him long after their conversation ended. He made his way back to the truck, his mind racing. Listening required more than just hearing. It demanded reflection and openness. He needed to understand the nuances of their concerns and unearth the fears tangled in their silence. What else were they carrying that went unspoken? That night he sat alone at home, the remnants of his public speech replaying in his mind like a broken record. As the moonlight streamed in, illuminating his cluttered desk filled with plans and notes, Jack understood he had to build bridges, not just with words, but through actions. He felt a surge of determination rising within him. The following days turned into a blur as Jack reached out to the community beyond the center, visiting homes, workplaces, even the local barber shop where lively chatter filled the air. Each conversation peeled away layers of misunderstanding. Sometimes he was met with cautious optimism, while other times he encountered refusal, hard-faced resistance to someone who had lived away from their struggles. Yet each exchange unveiled something he hadn't anticipated. The threads of connection, the pain intermixed with the hope, shaped into stories filled with resilience. He found a common narrative of loss echoed throughout, but also one of persistence, the will to reclaim what had been lost. There was something compelling in the honesty of those conversations, a blend of vulnerability and strength that ignited a fire in him. But amidst the growth, doubt still crept around the edges, whispering questions that gnawed at his progress. Would these interactions lead anywhere significant? Would those who had been burned by broken promises trust him enough to believe in a brighter future? With those thoughts circling, Jack devised a plan. He would organize a series of small gatherings, informal settings where people could come together and share their stories, not only with him, but with one another. A roundtable for truth, connection, and rebuilding relationships. He hesitated before sending out the invitations, the fear of failure clawing at him, testing his resolve. What if no one showed up? What if he had overstepped, made promises he couldn't keep? But then he remembered Martha's words about listening and the power it held to forge bonds. Taking a deep breath, he clicked send, propelling his intentions into the universe. As he shifted to sit on the floor, gazing at a wall covered with post-it notes of ideas and fears, the uncertainty gnawed at him again. What awaited him was a realm he had never traversed, one that required patience and deep introspection. The warmth of potential connections filled the air, but would he be able to transform intentions into reality? Would those he sought to uplift, in turn, uplift him? Just then, a notification buzzed on his phone. It was a message from George, asking to meet, each word heavy with the anticipation of uncharted discussions. Jack's heart raced. What lay in that next conversation? With renewed determination flaring within him, Jack knew it was time to confront what lay ahead and truly understand the essence of the journey he had embarked upon. Jack arrived at the small diner, the bell above the door jingling softly in recognition of his presence. George was already seated at a corner booth, nursing a cup of coffee. His face was a map of lines etched from years of worry and toil, but today it held a hint of curiosity. "Thanks for meeting me," Jack said, sliding into the seat across from him. The din of forks clanking against plates and distant conversations filled the air, but the small world within their booth felt charged with significance. "Not a problem," George replied, eyes scanning Jack's face for signs of his intent. "You seem different lately." The remark lingered, pushing Jack to consider the change bubbling within him. The surge of purpose he'd felt over the last few weeks had altered him, made him more reflective, yet he still struggled with self-doubt. "I'm trying to connect, to understand what everyone's been through. I want to help." George leaned back, a skeptical eyebrow raised. "Help how? You just came back. What do you really know about this place, about us?" Jack inhaled sharply, realizing that George's challenge required a response steeped in authenticity. It wasn't enough to express good intentions, he had to demonstrate his commitment. "I get that I've been away, but I'm sitting here because I want to learn. I also want to share an idea, a way for folks to come together and speak their truths." George's silence enveloped them, heavy and thick. Jack's palms began to sweat, and he felt an urgent need to fortify his proposition. "I believe if we can create a safe space where stories can be shared, it might foster some healing. We all carry so much, pain, hope, and getting it out there can make a difference." "Sharing stories?" George said, his tone skeptical. "You think that's going to change anything? People held on to their voices for years for a reason." "Because they've been hurt," Jack pressed, his emotions building like a wave. "But keeping it locked away only festers. Sometimes just having someone listen can begin to shift the weight." "Sharing stories?" George said, his tone skeptical. "You think that's going to change anything? People held on to their voices for years for a reason." "Because they've been hurt," Jack pressed, his emotions building like a wave. "But keeping it locked away only festers. Sometimes just having someone listen can begin to shift the weight." A contemplative look crossed George's face. He bypassed Jack's intensity, curious about the heart beneath the determination. "And what if they come and all they do is fight? What if you end up starting something you can't finish?" Jack felt the familiar tightening of fear wrapping around him, but he shook it off. "Then at least I'll be facing it head on. I'd rather try and fail than stand by and do nothing. Isn't that worth something?" The old man regarded him for a long moment, and Jack could see the wheels turning in his mind. Slowly, George reached for his coffee, taking a fortifying sip before responding. "You need to know that trust isn't given, it's earned. You're asking for men and women to face their deepest fears. You think they're willing to do that 'cause you say so?" Jack thought back to the conversations he'd had, the flickers of hope and the echoes of disillusionment. "Maybe they'll see me risking my own trust. It'll be hard for them, but maybe I can show them that vulnerability isn't a weakness." George nodded slowly, as if processing the weight of Jack's words. "You're not the only one who's been absent. You'll have to prove you're in it for the long haul, 'cause once they know you're here to stay, trust might build up, slowly, brick by brick." More than just an affirmation, George's words were a challenge, igniting a fire in Jack's gut. He would have to redefine what it meant to be present, continuing to seek understanding while actively engaged in their lives. As they continued to talk, the conversations deepened, turning into plans that felt more substantial. Jack left the diner feeling a torrent of emotions, fear blended with the exhilarating taste of possibility. When he returned home, he began drafting notes for the gatherings, questioning how best to encourage honesty and vulnerability. The fear of missteps loomed large, but alongside it came a strange exhilaration. He knew he was stepping into uncharted territory, where not only would he confront the scars of others, but also those within himself. Maybe the real journey was less about fixing a broken community and more about knowing he was just as prone to fractures. What was it that he truly feared losing, or worse, failing to discover? He leaned back in his chair, the glow of his desk lamp illuminating the scattered ideas. Doubt and determination battled within him, but the ink flowed, each stroke as much as a step towards building trust as any spoken word could convey. Then Jack's phone buzzed again on the table, a message lighting up the screen. It was from Martha. "We need to talk before the gatherings." His heart raced, the prospect of another conversation fraught with hidden revelations about the weight of expectations spinning around in his mind. What was Martha about to reveal, and how would it reshape his approach? Jack's pulse quickened as he read Martha's message. He hadn't spoken to her in weeks, and the looming nature of their discussion sent ripples of anxiety through him. What aspect of his journey did she want to address? The uncertain weight of expectations hung heavily over him as he contemplated their coming conversation. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. Jack understood that conversations like these could either strengthen his resolve or threaten to unravel it. He was not unprepared. He had done his homework, examined his intentions closely. But how would the strength he felt in those plans hold up against Martha's insights? Deciding to meet at a nearby park instead of his home, Jack hoped the openness of the outdoors would lighten the mood. He clasped his hands behind his head as he walked, absorbing the sounds around him: children laughing, the rustling of leaves, the distant hum of traffic. Each footstep caused thoughts to collide within his mind, doubt and determination grappling with one another. When Jack reached the park, he noticed Martha sitting on a bench, her expressive features softening in reaction to his approach. Her dark hair was pulled back, and her brow was creased with a concern that didn't escape him. "Hey," he said, attempting to infuse warmth into his voice. "Hey, Jack," she replied, her gaze immediately shifting to the ground. "I've been thinking a lot about what you're planning." Jack took a seat next to her, his heart pounding in the silence. "I know I haven't involved you as much as I should have." Martha flinched at his admission. "It's not just that. I'm worried you're diving into this without considering the consequences." Her sincerity anchored her words, and Jack felt the sting of a familiar vulnerability creeping in. He hadn't realized how much he had skirted around their shared history, burying it beneath his newfound desire to help. "My intentions are good," he started, but the moment he uttered those words he could sense their inadequacy. Intentions without action often yielded little. "I want to create a space where people can share their stories. I want them to feel listened to." Martha turned to him, her expression a blend of incredulity and sadness. "But Jack, can you really handle the pain they bring? You want them to share their truths, but are you ready for what that might mean for you?" Her question hung heavily in the air, while Jack reflected on the emotional weight ahead. He could picture the faces of those with buried stories and years of unspoken hurt. Would he be the strong one, or would he crumble beneath it? "I've danced around my own truths for too long, Martha," he responded, the determination in his voice crystallizing. "If I'm going to ask others to face their fears, I have to confront mine too." She studied him for a moment, then softened. "It's not just about confronting fears, Jack. It's about creating connections, real connections, that might hurt you too. You can't just pick up others' burdens without putting yourself at risk." As her words sank in, a sinking realization dawned. Was he prepared for that kind of emotional tumult? Was it even fair to impose the weight of his expectations on others while he treaded on unstable ground himself? "I want to be a part of the healing process, however messy," Jack admitted, and he meant it. The idea of weaving his own narrative into this tapestry felt daunting, but the thought of retreating felt like surrendering. Martha nodded, acknowledging the challenge in his eyes. "Just remember, healing begins with vulnerability, but it also requires balance. You can't lose yourself in their pain." Their conversation drifted into possibilities, and Jack felt the initial tension easing. The fear he once dreaded began to shift into something more malleable, a determination to chart his journey without losing his way. As they parted, Jack felt the weight of both encouragement and caution settle into his mind. Each encounter would be a test of his emotional resilience. He needed to prepare for the insecurities and awakening that awaited him. Later that night, Jack sat at his desk, surrounded by his notes and ideas, reflection a steady hum in his mind. As he jotted down his thoughts, he couldn't shake the nagging urge that there were still elements in his own life that required exploration. Perhaps along the way, he would discover his own fractured pieces, hidden until now. He leaned back and closed his eyes, contemplating the thrill of stepping into the unknown. But one question persisted. What self-revelations would surface when he faced not only other stories, but his own fractured truth? The stillness was interrupted by an unexpected knock on the door, an intrusion that pulled him from his thoughts.
Who could it be, and what new challenge awaited him behind that door? Jack's heart raced as he approached the door, a tangled mix of curiosity and apprehension flooding his senses. The urgency of the knock felt profound, reverberating against his thoughts still lingering from the conversation with Martha. This, he realized, could alter the trajectory he was so carefully contemplating. He opened the door slowly, revealing a tall figure shrouded in a long coat. The dim light in the hallway caught an air of familiarity in the man's face. It was Chris, an old friend from college whom Jack hadn't seen in years. An unexpected mixture of emotions coursed through him. Nostalgia mingled with a rising anxiety about what the visit might entail, a thick cloud of possibility enveloping the moment. "Chris?" Jack uttered, almost in disbelief, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you here?" "I've been in town for a while," Chris replied, his smile bright but tempered by an underlying seriousness. "I've heard about your plans, and I'd like to discuss them." Jack motioned for him to take a seat at the small kitchen table, his mind racing to comprehend the sudden intrusion. Full of questions. How much did Chris really know? Discussions of the past year had been mostly intimate. Did Chris perceive the struggle lying behind his ambitious venture? "I appreciate you coming by," Jack said, the tension easing slightly as he picked up a mug, warmth stewing from freshly brewed coffee. The steam curled into the air, a momentary distraction from the weight of his inner turmoil. "Chris," Jack uttered, almost in disbelief, stepping aside to let him in. "What brings you here?" "I've been in town for a while," Chris replied, his smile bright but tempered by an underlying seriousness. "I've heard about your plans, and I'd like to discuss them." Jack motioned for him to take a seat at the small kitchen table, his mind racing to comprehend the sudden intrusion. Full of questions. How much did Chris really know? Discussions of the past year had been mostly intimate. Did Chris perceive the struggle lying behind his ambitious venture? "I appreciate you coming by," Jack said, the tension easing slightly as he picked up a mug, warmth stewing from freshly brewed coffee. The steam curled into the air, a momentary distraction from the weight of his inner turmoil. "I know we've both been on different paths since college. What do you think about these plans of mine?" Chris leaned back slightly, his expression contemplative as he surveyed Jack. "To be honest, I think it's noble," he began, looking serious. "But just be cautious with how deep you want to dive. You're talking about people's lives, their stories. It's not an academic exercise. Their pain is real, like Martha said." Jack swallowed hard. Hearing Chris echo Martha's concerns felt daunting, but perhaps it was what he needed, a powerful reminder of the emotional investment that lay ahead. The stirring challenge within him intensified, urging him to confront something much deeper than he had yet acknowledged. "I know the risks," Jack admitted, a slight edge in his voice. "But I feel this is something I have to do. I've been avoiding my own truths for far too long. Can't I face that while helping others?" A fleeting silence enveloped the space before Chris leaned forward. "You can certainly try, but understand this. While you are attempting something commendable, you risk overextending yourself, Jack. The pain of others can seep into your mind, linger into your own reality if you're not careful. How do you plan to separate their burdens from your own?"
A deep-rooted fear churned within him, the realization dawning that the emotional landscape he was teetering on was fraught with risks of which he had barely scratched the surface. Jack's instinct was to push ahead, but it was moments like this that warranted careful reflection. "I guess I'll just have to learn that balance." Chris nodded, his gaze unwavering. "It's a slippery slope. Maybe consider how you've avoided your own struggles up until now. What are you afraid of uncovering? Because trust me, these journeys can force you to unearth patterns you might not be ready to confront." Frustration bubbled beneath Jack's calm facade. Was this yet another reminder of his fears, or perhaps a prelude to self-discovery? "You're right," he finally conceded, the weight of his unaddressed issues pulling him closer to despair. "But once I start this journey, I won't be able to turn back. I need to hold myself accountable for the most painful parts of my life." "Then do just that," Chris urged gently, his tone supportive yet unwavering. "Face those fears, but understand that it's okay to feel overwhelmed. Use those feelings as signposts for your progress. Just don't let them consume you." Jack felt the words carve a path through his mental fog, illuminating shadows that had long remained untouched. Somewhere beneath his persistent anxiety lay a foundation begging for exploration. The intricacies of his story, the burdens he had avoided, began to surface, urging him to finally integrate the experiences that shaped him. As they spoke late into the evening, Jack realized that the challenges he would face were as significant as the work ahead. The impending journey held within it the potential to illuminate not only the stories of others, but also the darkness within his own past. Hours later, Chris said his goodbyes, leaving Jack alone with his thoughts once again. The emotional dialogue had stirred something profound within him, igniting both apprehension and motivation. He knew he couldn't postpone confronting his fears any longer, but as he mulled over their conversation, one unresolved question echoed in his mind. What terrifying truths were still waiting in the shadows of his past? That lingering uncertainty left him restless, urging him to delve deeper, to discover what buried stories would come to light during his journey. Jack understood that understanding others would demand a reckoning of self, a balancing act between empathy and self-preservation. In that stark confrontation, there lay the potential for real growth. What if the moment to finally reclaim his narrative was upon him? The morning, Jack awoke with a sense of foreboding yet awakening. As sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, it illuminated the clutter of papers scattered around the table. Research notes, ideas for potential interview questions, and sketches of narratives he hoped to build. They lay there, an intricate mosaic of ambition, yet warning.
Today marked a pivotal juncture. He had to confront the fears that loomed like storm clouds threatening to obscure his path. He brewed another cup of coffee, the familiar aroma grounding him momentarily. Flip after flip of the pages revealed a well of stories waiting to be captured, but every narrative danced around the core of his own unspoken truths. How could he help others face their ghosts if he remained shackled by his own? With a deliberate inhale, he retrieved a notebook, determined to harness the clarity of thought Chris had sparked. Jack's pen hovered above the blank page, the need to articulate his fears surfacing almost like a gentle tide. What am I avoiding? The question echoed uncomfortably. It was a prompt to excavate his past, but a gnawing dread tightened his chest. As he scribbled, fragments of memories emerged, brisk and disquieting. The loss of his father lingered in the folds of his mind, a specter that haunted not only his youth, but also clouded the essence of who he believed himself to be. What am I really afraid to uncover? The sentence hung there, punctuated with the heartbeat of anticipation. Jack closed his eyes, allowing the kaleidoscope of recollections to unfurl. The day of his father's funeral flashed before him, the muted faces, the sobbing, and his own awkward resolve to remain stoic. What had it cost him to bottle that grief? The act of writing transformed from a simple exploration to a raw confrontation. Each word wove itself into the tapestry of his unprocessed emotions, strings of guilt and resentment now intertwined. I'm not just afraid of my past, I'm terrified of its influence over my future. As his thoughts poured onto the page like rain, he felt a shift inside. Perhaps re-evaluating old stories could clear the fog that clouded his future aspirations. The scales of empathy could only balance when his own burdens were acknowledged. The notion sparked a new question. How can I rewrite my story while still honoring the truth of what I've been through? With renewed determination, Jack mapped out potential narratives, each punctuated by an evocation of vulnerability and truth. He imagined speaking with individuals who shared parallel experiences. Stories of loss, struggle, and resilience revealed themselves as integral to shaping a broader message, one of hope and healing. The hands of the clock crept forward, but time no longer felt stagnant. Instead, it surged like a river toward an unknown horizon. By reframing the tales he would tell, perhaps he could excavate the buried facets of himself that had long lain dormant. Mid-morning, he made his way to a local community center, an environment pulsating with life and purpose. He had sensed the instant need to immerse himself in the very narratives he yearned to explore. As he strolled through the hallways, Jack felt a blend of excitement and trepidation, prepared yet apprehensive about the conversations he might provoke. Would others willingly expose their vulnerabilities to him? His heart beat steadily, determination marking his steps as he prepared for the discussions ahead. Each encounter, after all, would forge a dual path, the sharing of others' stories and the exploration of his own, a delicate interplay that could reshape his existence as much as theirs. Just as he approached the registration desk, poised to sign up for an upcoming workshop on storytelling, a voice called out from behind him, "Jack, wait up!" He turned, recognition dawning as another familiar face materialized, one that stirred a different kind of anticipation. Things were about to get much more complicated, and Jack couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment looming like a new chapter on the brink of being written. "Are you ready to face some truths?" the voice questioned, resonating through the corridors of possibility. Jack turned to find Alexis, a former colleague from his journalism days. Her eyes sparkled with a mix of mischief and challenge.
"I didn't expect to see you here," he replied, masking his sudden anxiety. Alexis had a knack for cutting straight to the heart of any matter, a facet that both thrilled and terrified him. "I've been tracking your journey through social media," she stated, her tone light but her gaze intense. "I hear you're diving into storytelling now." He shifted his weight, feeling the weight of her scrutiny. "I'm trying to," he admitted, aware that the act of trying was fraught with its own vulnerabilities. "And by trying, you mean confronting your past and helping others with theirs?" she challenged, an eyebrow raised. "Haven't quite nailed down the helping others part yet," Jack confessed, shifting the focus from his own discomfort. "Just exploring for now." "Exploring," she repeated, the word hanging like a spectral question. "The question is, are you ready to actually delve into it? It sounds like you're walking a tightrope between curiosity and fear." Her words echoed like a crack of thunder in the otherwise subdued atmosphere around them. Jack's pulse quickened. He could play along, but where did that lead? Would he retreat behind the veil of superficial conversation, or lean into the uncomfortable truth she held up? He took a step toward her, gathering resolve. "What do you mean?" "Listen, I know the stories people tell when faced with loss. I've seen you write. You touch on sadness, but do you actually understand it?" The challenge hung between them, charged with both confrontation and camaraderie. "I'm not afraid to understand it," Jack shot back, more defensively than he intended. "Are you sure? Maybe it's time to show your hand, Jack. Take the plunge into your own story before capturing others. You might find that opening up is the real catalyst for growth." Her words stirred something deep within, a combination of irritation and realization. He hadn't thought about it that way.
Was he genuinely ready to peel back his layers? To invite others in alongside his journey of self-discovery? "I'm here to learn," he replied more softly, admitting his own uncertainty in a landscape of boldness. "Good. How about you join me for that workshop? I need a partner for a project, and you might find it's easier to face yourself with a co-pilot." She grinned, mischief still dancing in her eyes. At that moment, faced with her proposal, Jack could feel the tension tighten in his chest. Accepting her invitation would lead to a space of shared vulnerability, a realm ripe with the potential for both insight and exposure. "Why do you want a partner?" "Because," she drawled with a soft intensity, "confrontation is easier with someone you trust. Also, you're not as predictable as you think." Jack chuckled, surprised by her insight. "I'm predictable enough for my own comfort." "Comfort? That's a dangerous word, Jack." With that, she pressed her lips together, the spark of challenge never flickering from her gaze. It struck him then, standing there in the fluorescent light of the community space, that this moment could either bind him to a sense of purpose or unravel everything he'd just begun to untangle. To step into the unknown was terrifying, yet leaving behind unexamined limits was equally harrowing. "All right," he found himself agreeing, feeling the energy around them shift, work like an electric current. "Let's do it." "Fantastic," Alexis responded, the delight in her expression palpable. "Get ready. It's going to be a wild ride. You might just find yourself in the process." As they walked together to the workshop, Jack felt a burgeoning sense of possibility fused with trepidation. The unspoken truths that he had skirted around now stood tall, waiting for confrontation. Could this journey through storytelling forge a new chapter of understanding, healing, and purpose for him? The choice weighed heavy, but exhilarating. With every step, Jack confronted a new reality, one in which he must face his own truths before guiding others through theirs. Yet another question festered beneath the surface, lingering like an unanswered plea.
Would unveiling his own narrative grant him the healing he so desperately sought, or would it awaken ghosts long thought buried? The workshop door loomed ahead, a threshold not just to new skills, but to moments of reckoning that could redefine everything he believed about himself. As he reached for the handle, a shiver of doubt shot through him. Was he prepared for what lay beyond? With a steady hand, Jack pushed open the door to the workshop, the creaking hinges signaling his arrival into a space filled with anticipation. The room was bright, adorned with images of diverse storytellers, faces that told tales of resilience, struggle, and hope. His heart raced. The collective energy in the room prompted a swirling mix of excitement and apprehension about what lay ahead. Alexis waved him over to a table scattered with notebooks and pens. "Welcome to the adventure," she said, her tone teasing yet warm. "This is where vulnerability meets creativity. Are you ready?" Jack took a deep breath, the smell of fresh ink and paper rejuvenating his spirit. "I'm ready, but I think this goes beyond just being prepared." His voice, usually confident, wavered slightly as he braced himself for honesty, both in his storytelling and his exploration of self. As they settled into the session, the instructor introduced the concept of storytelling as a bridge to understanding one's own life narrative. "Each of you can reshape your past into a story that empowers," she enthused, pausing to let the weight of her words sink in. "But first, you must confront the truth within you." Jack's heart raced. Would he be able to articulate the pain of his childhood, the anger of unprocessed grief? A tightening sensation wound around his throat, but beneath it lay a current of unyielding resolve. This was his moment to dismantle the walls he had built. As the first activity began, Jack listened intently, observing other participants share snippets of their stories. Each tale was woven with threads of vulnerability, heartache, and redemption. The stories echoed truths he had long avoided, igniting a warmth within him that spiraled into courage. When it was his turn, he stood, confronting the collective gaze of the room. "I grew up in a small town," he began, the memories flooding back, forming a narrative that demanded attention. "After losing my dad, I buried my feelings, convinced that strength meant not crying. Yet every laugh felt hollow. I became a stranger to myself, unwilling to navigate through that grief." His voice faltered. The memories were visceral, raw. But the weight of emotional honesty pushed him forward. Finding value in vulnerability seemed impossible until now. As he spoke, Jack witnessed the power of connection. Each nod and empathetic glance illuminated portions of him he had long hidden. With every word, it was as if the heavy cloak he had worn for years began to lift. He envisioned his father, the love and warmth juxtaposed against the cold reality of loss. In that moment of truth-telling, he realized that to share his pain was not a burden, but a gift, a step towards healing both for himself and those who listened. When he finished, the room erupted into applause. The recognition felt validating, but even more so, it marked a profound turning point. Jack had not only stepped into his truth, but had begun to reclaim his narrative with souls who resonated deeply with his experience. After the first workshop, there was a palpable shift in Jack. He interacted with Alexis and others differently now, grounded in authenticity. "It feels liberating," he admitted one afternoon, sipping coffee as they prepared for the next session. "I've been carrying all this weight alone for so long." Alexis smiled. "You've embraced your story, Jack. Remember, this is just the beginning. The deep dive into vulnerability will reveal a richer tapestry of who you truly are." Weeks passed. Jack attended several workshops and shared his journey with others, allowing their stories to shape his understanding further. He learned that the strength of vulnerability was not merely a tool for connection, but a mirror reflecting his growth. A catalyst that illuminated not just his past, but forged paths toward a future filled with purpose. On the day of the final workshop, the instructor encouraged everyone to think about next steps, about transforming their narratives into action. Jack felt the stirrings of ambition crystallize into clarity. "I want to create a storytelling initiative for our community," he declared after a deep breath, addressing the group. "A platform where we can come together to share our experiences, not as individuals separated by loss, but as a collective embracing compassion, where listening becomes as important as the telling." The response was enthusiastic. The energy in the room crackled with possibilities. Jack could see recognition in the eyes of his peers. The same fire igniting hope blossomed around him. In the weeks that followed, Jack worked tirelessly to lay the groundwork for the initiative. He collaborated with locals, planned community events, and crafted a structure that honored the diverse stories shaping their fabric. He witnessed the power of shared experiences igniting a sense of belonging. New friendships sprouted from laughter shared over stories of resilience. When the inaugural event finally arrived, Jack stood before an audience reflected in their expectant gazes. "Welcome," he began, settling into the familiarity of the setting he'd long envisioned. As he spoke and individuals shared their stories, Jack felt more anchored than ever before. A mutual exchange occurred, weaving a tapestry that connected him not only to Martha, George, and the community, but to himself in ways he had yet to realize. That night, beneath a canvas of stars, Jack embraced the culmination of his journey, sharing laughter, tears, and healing. Amidst this collective sharing, he felt grounded in a newfound identity, one that surged with confidence and compassion. He had conquered the fears that once restricted him. As the lights dimmed and conversations continued, Jack understood that through the act of storytelling, he had woven his past into a narrative of strength, both for himself and for those around him. This moment solidified his transformation, not merely a millionaire cowboy, but a man walking truthfully and authentically among fellow humans. The journey of self-discovery and community building hadn't merely altered his identity, it gifted him with profound purpose. Jack Mitchell was now not only recognized in his community as a man of wealth, but, more importantly, as one of conviction, committed to nurturing connections and healing journeys through shared stories that would echo for generations. Now it was your turn. You need to subscribe now to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now so you can feed the algorithm and push forward these essential narratives. Comment below with your reactions and theories about this journey of transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this powerful conclusion. Let's spread the word together.